Hey there, I'm Patti Ogilvie, and I'm a senior enrollment counselor with the Student Loan Help Group.
And I'm Sam Pettingill. I'm also a senior enrollment counselor with the Student Loan Help Group.
So today, Sam and I are going to talk to you guys about a little bit more about the CARES Act and what it is. And then we're going to also go over some important upcoming dates for different things that the DOE is doing that are going to be important for you for 2023. And then we're going to also review some other information that you guys are going to find really helpful. So we'll just start out by saying most of you probably have heard about the Biden relief. That's what you all are calling it, but it's actually called debt relief program. And for people who have direct loans, they're going to be eligible for $10,000 in forgiveness if it happens. And we'll talk more about that later. But if it happens, if you have an income of less than $125,000, if you're single or you file your taxes married separate, you'll get $10,000. If you're joint, you have to have an income of less than $250,000 combined adjusted gross income. And then also, if you had a Pell Grant, then your total that you're going to be forgiven is going to be $20,000. So we're just going to touch briefly on this now, and then we'll talk more about it as we progress. But this is leading into the next item that Sam and I want to talk about. So Sam, what's the CARES Act and how does it impact the student loan borrowers?
So the CARES Act, it's a forbearance. It's a federal pause on paying student loans. When the pandemic began back in March of 2020, Congress passed the Federal CARES Act. That included a lot of provisions that help student loan borrowers. So the whole thing took effect March 13th of 2020. And if your loans are eligible, the Department of Education automatically paused your loan payments on that date and set your interest rate to
Uh-oh. Something happened.
Okay. Yes.
Sam.
If you're going toward a forgiveness program, you probably just want to let the CARES Act ride out. If you're looking at making payments during that period, the full amount of your payments gets applied to your principal once you've paid all the interest that accrued before the CARES Act started. So if you aren't going toward a forgiveness program, say you have a very low balance and you don't qualify for the Biden relief, then all of the payments you're making go toward your principal unless you have outstanding interest to overcome first. The other important things here, if you were on auto debit, you probably noticed your auto debit payments were automatically suspended back in March when the payment pause began. That's auto debit is going to stay turned off until after the CARES Act is over. You can also get a refund for any payment that was made, including auto debit payments, starting on March 13th of 2020. So if your loans are covered by the CARES Act and you made payments not realizing that you didn't have to, you still have time to go back to your servicer and request that your payment be refunded.
Now, Sam, before we go on, so an eligible loan would be a direct loan, not a family federal education loan, for example. So not everybody is entitled to a refund and not everybody was put on pause.
Yep, and we're going to cover that in just a moment too. Not all loans were eligible. But
Okay.
if you are on that zero interest and no payments, then yes, you can get a refund of those payments that were made. And for people who happen to be in the unfortunate situation of being in default, the CARES Act actually stopped collections on defaulted loans. So wage garnishment, tax offset, that's if you've been losing your tax refund to the federal government, those things have stopped for the duration of the CARES Act. And normally defaulted loans can have an interest rate of up to 22%. The interest rate has been set to zero even for defaulted loans for the duration of the CARES Act.
That's great.
And basically, the extensions have happened. The original CARES Act was only set for something like 6 months. We've been getting extensions every 6 months or so since March of 2020. The most recent extension just happened in November. And basically, it's a little bit confusing. It's why we mentioned the Biden relief first. This student loan payment pause, the CARES Act pause, will continue until the Department of Education is allowed to start the debt relief program President Biden had announced. So the $10,000 or $20,000 that Patti just mentioned, until that's allowed to be implemented or the litigation around it is resolved. Meaning, if, for example, there were to be no legal path forward, it's that the program has been completely defeated, then that would start the countdown for us to go back into repayment. That will be a 60-day countdown. So say the student loan debt relief program is allowed to go through on, say, March 1st, then May 1st, we would be able to start back into making our student loan payments. So if for whatever reason that has not happened by June 30th of next year of 2023, then that 60-day payment pause will start right then, or the 60-day countdown will start right then, and the payment pause will end after 60 days. So we would expect that would be August 31st would be the last date, so payments would start September 1st.
Very good, very good.
So Patti, we mentioned that just a little bit a moment ago. Which loans are eligible for the CARES Act?
So for the CARES Act, eligible loans are direct loans, whether they're defaulted or non-defaulted. Family Federal Education Loans, you may all know them as FFEL loans. These are going to be older loans. They don't even issue those anymore if they're held by the Department of Education. Also, even if they're defaulted or non-defaulted. Federal Perkins loan held by the Department of Education. Defaulted FFEL loans held by the Department of Education. And also defaulted HEL loans. Ineligible loans are non-defaulted FFEL loans that are not held by the Department of Education. And that becomes a little bit confusing. And the best thing to do is just have us take a look, and we'll go over that later with you, because you don't want to do something that's going to wind up getting you in trouble later. So best to know exactly what kind of loans you have. Just don't assume. Also, Federal Perkins loans not held by the Department of Education, non-defaulted HEL loans, and private student loans are all ineligible. Again, don't assume that you are eligible or ineligible. Let somebody like us take a look, and we'll let you know for sure. And then some FFEL program and HEL loans are held by commercial lenders. Some Perkins loans also held by the school that you attended. And if your loan is eligible, you can contact your servicer about what benefits may be available to you. But again, I would still say, let us take a look, because the servicers don't always give 100% accurate information. I'm not saying it's intended, but a lot of times you don't get the same information twice when you call back twice. So best to let us as experts at least take a look for you. And then Sam, for students who've already applied for loan forgiveness, will this impact their eligibility?
No, the CARES Act will not impact eligibility at all for federal forgiveness programs. It's a completely separate program. In fact, for most borrowers, the CARES Act is going to be a benefit, because the CARES Act months will count toward income-driven repayment forgiveness if you're set up correctly. They'll also count toward public service loan forgiveness if you have a qualifying full-time public service employer and you're set up correctly. So it's very important to make sure everything is done right. Even if you're not set up correctly right now, there's a one-time account adjustment coming next year that you'll be able to count the CARES Act months if you get set up correctly now. So definitely not a good time to wait, something you want to get that straightened out as soon as you can.
Now, so just to take that a step further. So let's say that I'm working towards public service loan forgiveness, and by the time the CARES Act ends, let's just say there's, 40 months. Those 40 months are going to count as if I was making payments toward the 120. So you're not losing any time whatsoever. It's like a gift from the Department of Education. Yep.
And you're actually, you're gaining a ton of time. And for some people, it's especially people who are in situations where maybe the income-driven payment is not their best option. The standard payment is a valid payment for PSLF if you have a non-consolidated loan and you're on the 10-year standard. Those people, that 40 months of PSLF credit for this time in the CARES Act, that makes the difference between now getting forgiveness and not getting forgiveness if you've been on standard up to this point. So that's for some people, it's a huge gift.
Right. That's amazing.
So Patti, is it too late for people to take advantage of this opportunity if they want to get into the CARES Act?
No, it's not. You can become eligible for the CARES Act by consolidating your Federal Perkins loans or your non-defaulted FFEL loans not held by the Department of Education. And what would happen is you would be issued a new direct consolidated loan through the Department of Education, which would then turn your loans into the correct loan type. Again, I can't stress this enough. Don't assume anything and do anything until you know for sure, because once you do a consolidation, you cannot undo that. So please, again, I'm going to stress it again, don't do anything with consolidating your loans until somebody like us looks at them for you.
Absolutely. That's especially important if you have, like, for example, Parent Plus loans that you took out for a child. You do not normally want to consolidate those with your own loans. And there's other situations where people, like, maybe you thought you had FFEL loans, but you don't. You really want to make sure you have the right type first.
And then too, I've found too, and you may have found this, Sam, is that a lot of times people think that they have private loans, and then we log in and we log into studentaid.gov and we can see their loans there. If we can see their loans there, and they're not private, but a lot of people think those FFEL loans are private and they've got no options, and that is not true.
Especially people who were with like Sallie Mae, which is now Navient, people who are with AES, American Education Services. I've seen a lot of those people assume they have private loans.
Yep. So don't assume, you guys.
Yep.
And then, Sam, this is a good one for you because I didn't even know about this program. What is the Student Loan Repayment Assistance Program?
So as part of the provisions of the initial CARES Act back in March of 2020, the CARES Act was a huge bill. It affected a lot of other things besides just federal student loans. It also affected like the first round of stimulus payments, things like that. But Section 2206 of the CARES Act created a temporary tax-free provision for employer student loan assistance programs. So if you work for an employer and your employer contributes toward your student loan payments, that can continue during the CARES Act. You do not have to actually make those payments during the CARES Act. Your employer can continue to provide that benefit to you. So for example, someone in public service loan forgiveness, you could actually, receive that benefit from your employer, put it into a savings account, and be able to use it when the CARES Act is over to make your monthly payments. Basically, what this allows you to do, an employer can make up to $5,250 in student loan payments for an employee each year. So each calendar year, up to $5,250. Whether those payments are made directly to the employee or to the student loan servicer, the money is still considered tax-free. And that's for both the employer and the employee. So
Wow.
You as an employee, yep, you don't pay income taxes on that $5,250, even if you take it and put it in a savings account to pay your loans off later. And the employer gets a payroll tax exclusion as well. So nobody pays taxes on that $5,250 or up to $5,250, and that goes toward your student loans either now or in the future. And the great thing is that's not going to end when the CARES Act ends. Last year in 2021, there was a Consolidated Appropriations Act that extended the deadline for this program all the way to December 31st of 2025.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, I mean, you've got another 3 years that you could have these contributions from your employer if your employer participates in a program like this and pay no taxes.
And so that's what they would have to do, is reach out to their employer and find out if they participate in the program.
Yep. If your employer doesn't participate, I mean, it's a great benefit to offer for employees. It has a lot of benefits for employers. So it's something a lot of employers are increasingly starting to pick up.
Yeah. And really, I'm going to go out on a limb. If we didn't know about it, then chances are a lot of employers don't even know about it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, a lot of the research I've done has suggested that.
So I would definitely check into that, you guys.
All right. Well, Patti, I mean, we've covered a lot of things about the CARES Act and things that are happening right now. What can borrowers expect on the road ahead?
So, back to the, everybody's calling it Biden relief, and it's, and that's what you all know it, Biden-Harris debt relief program. So a lot of you already know that the courts have issued orders blocking the student debt relief program, at least for now. So at this time, the DOE is not accepting applications for this program, but some of you may have already submitted those. They're going to hold on to those. They're not doing anything with them because they're looking to hopefully overturn the orders on blocking it. There's an appeal in process right now. They're not going to start talking about it again until, what did we say, Sam, like in March or something, March or June?
February is the date that the Supreme Court is supposed to hear the initial arguments. So that's probably when it'll be back in the news.
And so, fingers crossed that it happens. And so we just have to keep an eye out and see, like we were saying earlier, 10,000 if you've got direct federal loans, and 20,000 in forgiveness if you've got also over the years you had a Pell Grant. So then you're entitled to 20,000 as long as you meet the income requirements that I mentioned earlier. In July, there's going to be a one-time account adjustment. This is something totally different than the Biden relief. And there's a lot that we don't exactly know about it just yet. So you just want to stay tuned, and we'll go over more of it in the future. But what they're saying, they being the DOE, is that come July, they're going to be doing a one-time account adjustment and giving a weighted average for the time in repayment from your past. They're going to be giving time for people who've spent time in long-term forbearance. So there are a lot of great things on the horizon. They just have not committed to it yet. Let's just put it that way. And then also, there's going to be some permanent changes to public service loan forgiveness also coming in July 2023. And we'll cover that in a future webinar once we all know more about it. The DOE is notorious for making, insinuations that they're going to do this and that, but until it's actually in writing, we'll wait and we'll discuss it more, obviously, in more detail in the future. And then another great thing, we come across this all the time, is that there are people who've had, they don't even allow this anymore, but back in the day, they used to allow spousal consolidations, which would allow, husband and wife to jointly consolidate their student loans, which has turned into a nightmare for a lot of those people. And also, they were not eligible to work towards any of the forgiveness programs that way. Well, they just a couple months ago implemented a joint consolidation loan separation act. So you guys who have spousal consolidations will in the future be able to separate those. The DOE has not given any information on that or how it's going to happen, but it is going to happen. And again, we'll keep you guys updated also. So a lot of great things going to happen here really soon. And then Sam, what are some of the dates that that people should have on their calendars and be aware of for next year when it comes to their student loans?
Well, one of the big ones is coming up on May 1st of next year of 2023. That's the date by which, if you want to benefit from the one-time account adjustment and you currently have FFEL loans, so that older loan type that was phased out back in 2010, that's the date you have to have consolidated your loans to direct loans by in order to benefit from the one-time account adjustment. So the account adjustment itself will be happening in July of 2023, but if you have not started a consolidation by May 1st and you have FFEL loans, then unfortunately you're not going to be able to benefit from that adjustment. So that's probably the biggest date next year for people in that situation.
Definitely.
And then of course the one-time account adjustment will be happening in July. It may happen sooner than July for certain people if you're at a point where you might be put into a forgiveness situation already. Say you've already made more than 120 payments for PSLF with the one-time adjustment. You might even see that earlier than July. And then at the end of June 30th of 2023, that is the deadline I had mentioned before in context of the Biden relief program. The CARES Act forbearance will start its 60-day winding down period, kind of that countdown to going back into repayment on June 30th of 2023, if there has not been a resolution to the Biden debt relief program by then. So if it's still tied up in court and they still haven't been able to get to the bottom of it, that will start the 60 days for the end of the CARES Act. And then the last thing would be if that Biden-Harris debt relief does survive the court challenges, if it does continue forward, December 31st of 2023 is the last day to apply. So if that does come out of the legal challenges that it's in right now, you would want to make sure you get your application in before the end of next year.
Now, back to the May 1st date, 2023, I don't know that people realize how important it is that if you've got FFEL loans, you definitely have to reach out to us or, do some research on your own, but you want to make sure you do not miss that date, because after May 1st, you're still going to have FFEL loans and you can still be set up correctly. But the difference is that, let's say I have, 90 payments that I made on an FFEL loan that normally wasn't eligible. Once I go through the process and I meet that deadline by May 1st, all those past payments are going to count towards, just for example, the 120 needed for public service loan forgiveness. If I don't make that deadline, if I have FFEL loans, you can still go through the process. But the difference is that you will be starting over at payment number 1 of 120. So that date is very, very important, you guys. So definitely don't delay. I know a lot of people procrastinate when it comes to their student loans, but please don't, because you are at a huge risk of losing like a once in a lifetime opportunity, as far as I'm concerned.
Definitely. I just talked to a gentleman in that situation yesterday. A friend of his had spoken with me and she said, you need to call, I realized you're in the same situation that I'm in. He had $40,000 in FFEL loans. If he missed that May 1st date, he would be working for another 10 years. He was a year away from retirement.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was already 12 years into paying. He was done as far as the one-time account adjustment is concerned once he was set up correctly. And that difference of missing that May 1st date would have been a $40,000 mistake for him.
Yeah,
So-
and it's been life-changing for a lot of people who normally would just keep paying until, they either die or, they pay it off in full. So it's a huge opportunity that I would not risk
Sure.
missing for sure.
So Patty, where can people get more information and updates if they want to know more about the CARES Act?
So people can always go to studentaid.gov, and you all may know it as FSA or Federal Student Aid. So you can keep up with announcements there as well. Now, your servicer and studentaid.gov aren't going to walk you through the process or look at your loans and tell you what you should or shouldn't do. So definitely just set up a free phone consultation with us. We'll look at your loans. We'll go over everything with you. We'll tell you what your options are and what needs to be done. And then this way, at least it's going to take out the guesswork. That's what I would suggest. If it were me and I had all this money on the line in student loans that I may miss out on any of these opportunities, I would call us for sure and just, go through the process. You're not obligated to us in any way. And we all do an amazing job. Our team is amazing. That's what I would do.
Absolutely. And even if you aren't, I know we've talked a lot about public service and public service loan forgiveness. Even if you aren't in public service, that one-time account adjustment is still going to apply to you through a different program called IDRF. So even if you've heard some of this and you're like, I don't think any of this is going to apply to me. I don't know if my balance is high enough, or maybe my loans are just too old. It's always worth finding out. And you never know.
Exactly.
So,
I would too.
At the worst, you've spent 15 minutes or 20 minutes on the phone with us and you've gotten the answers and you know that, hey, I've done everything that I can.
Yep. And the guesswork is gone.
Yep, exactly.
Well, great. Well, as always, we appreciate y'all, spending your time with us, viewing our webinar. And next month, we will definitely go more into detail about the one-time account adjustment, as well as any other information that we have. So stay tuned for our next webinar, you guys. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.